Thanks to everybody for making time out on a Friday. I don't know whether that's a reward or punishment, but I do appreciate your focus, and that makes you even more committed to new ideas and new concepts that we try to figure out the future. We'll pause for those of you who were on the initial program a couple weeks ago. I had teased a major promotional series coming through the Relevance Project. I'm happy to say it's now up on relevanceproject.net. It's a 6-part promotional series that anchors and confirms for any skeptics that all generations read newspapers. It seems shocking we have to say that, but every day we're reminded that people just don't get our story straight. But I encourage you to take a look at it in the revenue resource area of relevanceproject.net. There are 3 of the promotions deal with the generations, including newspapers being rewarded for multimedia or all platform strategies, and pretty strong data based on Coda Ventures, a research firm in Tennessee that's been working with state press associations in the United States and has accumulated and aggregated enough data from 7 market studies for these associations to make some conclusions, and they are a valued contributing partner to the Relevance Project, and we gave permission along with the state press associations to use the data for these promotions. So they're up and running. I just wanted to make mention of that since I teased it last time. So I'm excited about doing this program because it's one reason for me being part of the Relevance Project. But I want to put some caveats because my presentation basically are the notes about what the community forum means. And so I just want to add some caveats or some context. When I say be the community forum, I am advocating as part of the Relevance Project, I'm making a case for a different type of approach to the business we're in, or the craft we're in, or the profession we're in. And I'm advocating us making some changes in how we go about engaging our communities to deepen the relationships we have with our consumers, our readers, our non-readers, our neighbors, whoever you want to refer to them as. And this is part of the transformation of newspapers, and it's more than just digital and print. It's talking about engaging your communities. The other thing I want to be clear on is that I admire what you're doing. I respect what you're doing. And I'm not telling you what to do. And until you grasp this and figure out it's best for you, it's not going to work well unless you embrace it. But the same token, it might not be for everybody. Then there might be staffing limitations. The market may be ready. You might be having other priorities. You may have a very demanding boss. So I'm just an advocate for the community forum. And towards the end of the program, I'll explain why I have a bias for it because of what I did in Richmond. But when I say community forum, I'm talking to the context is to view it in 2 ways. One, it's an overall way to better engage an audience. Media is an audience, but it's overall, if you add the actions under the community forum strategy, it's a better way to engage the audience, engage your community, engage your market. And also I refer to it as the centerpiece of the community forum is actually the town hall format, which you build around. That's what's interesting about the pandemic is the town hall format can be done in person or it can be done online. And I have more experience in the in-person, but I'm looking to work with newspapers and associations that also want to use it on the online platform. If one of the things I want to say at the outset, I am allegedly retired, but I'm still active because of the Relevance Project. My ultimate job would be able to go on the road and put on town halls with newspapers for newspapers throughout the country and help them practice that important civic dialogue activity that the country really needs these days, to the point where newspapers as a community forum become the ear to improve the minds of their community. I'd buy a trailer and stick a community forum banner on it and just travel around the country and do it. I will also say another caveat: this isn't for the meek, and it may require the investment. I'm not so put off by saying the meek because there's a lot of strong personalities among our newspapers, and you've been through a lot. But I just want to say it's not for the meek. You got to take some risk, and it might require an investment. We can get into that a little bit, but I'm convinced, based on my experience, it's the place to be. And it just so happens that there is a select group of executive directors throughout the country who are part of the Newspaper Association managers who believe so, to make this a key part of the Relevance Project. And I will say that need more converts and ambassadors for this, for the work. And they can come from the associations or they can come from the newspapers itself. So I've done this a couple, 3 times, but I wanted to add this context on top of it before we get going. So let's kind of explore what the community forum is all about. Again, Julie did a nice job of teasing, and since a lot of you were on the initial program about the 10 things you need to do about the Relevance Project, I don't have to spend a lot of time over here. You can see that it's the community forum strategy is a key part of the Relevance Project in 2021. And it's also welded to the notion that that we need to do a great job and continue to do a great job of telling the stories about us and not leaving it to others. And I'll get into that one reason why this is necessary. You're going to hear me go community forum over and over again. It's one way of stressing, the label, but again, it's a broader strategy, and its centerpiece is the town hall format. And so, in making the case, sometimes you got to be a little uncomfortable, and I'll roll through this, but every day we're told the community newspapers are in peril. I don't mean to depress, but there's some certain things that are not going our way. Again, the community forum is a potential strategy. So the background that the reason for advancing this are because we have some of the problems. And I worked at a daily for a long period of time, but I've also worked on weeklies, and newspapers are settling into a niche. The problem with a niche is it's a smaller audience and it probably has smaller revenues. Again, there's probably a lot of contrarians on the call right now who are doing exactly opposite, growing their audience, and that's great. But overall, if you look at the numbers, this is what's happening. The most disturbing thing, and the reason for the community forum, is that others are controlling the narrative. There are too many other people who are writing stories about us or talking about us that are not really helping us. There is one this week from Lion Publishers. And in many cases, our industry response remains fractured. It's getting a little better. America's Newspapers is trying to be one of those key voices. Applaud them for doing it. But are there too many groups? I kind of asked that. And everywhere, and maybe it's because I'm on the East Coast, but there's this obsession with big media. If it doesn't happen in big media, I don't know about you, it always kidded me when big media got attention for something, and we had been doing it in Richmond for many, many years. So that is a problem, though. That's the way the public skews, and what's happening with the political situation kind of helps that. This is a key point that I think, a lot of us believe strongly, that trusted local journalism is important to democracy, but for it to prosper down the road, it's going to need greater community support. And we're going to have to do different things so that we can adapt and survive and grow. And we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone just by putting out a product. And the other question is, maybe we're worn out from the pandemic, but are we losing our inspiration? And moving towards a community format strategy can get that inspiration back. I know I'll talk a bit about my experience in Richmond and how I did that. So we've got these problems. And then from a media standpoint, we're also squeezed between print and social media. It's a reality we need to deal with. And I'll spare you my problems with social media. But this is part of the landscape. The good thing is, in our minds and in our hearts and also in our soul, we think we're relevant, which is a good position to be in. And we think we're relevant because we do the work of reporting the news and providing information. and publishing fact-based commentary. We know we're relevant because, you know, we hold positions of power or institutions accountable. I actually saw a job description recently for an accountability reporter. I just kind of scratched my head and said, "Isn't that what all reporters are doing?" But at least it's how we're showing we're relevant. We know when we're local. We demonstrate relevance, and there's nothing wrong with being the traditional gatekeeper because we've done it for so many years. So when a new entity comes on the scene, you know, they've got to go up against that. And God bless us, we're covering politics at arm's length. We still put the news before the commentary, unlike the talking heads. So the fact that we have a history of thinking we're relevant, it's a good thing, and it should be a launching pad into being a community forum. I will say, going with the problems that I cited or the issues, the challenges, whatever you want to term it, in 2021, there's a but. There's always a but the but is, you know, I think our relevance needs revamping, and this battle that caused by digital and social media being disruptive, you know, they have changed, whether we like it or not. They've changed how information is sourced and distributed, and they've also changed the behaviors and attitudes when, you know, people go to look for news or get news and information. Again, this might be different in a community where you are the only source. I understand that, but in a general sense, this is what's happening. And the question is, you know, do we have the ability to change accordingly, or, you know, are we prevented from making those changes, or are we always in transition land? I will say one counter to it, so admirable about how many people, how many newspapers survived the pandemic and did so well. You know, back in March, April, and May of 2020, there was a lot of predictions that even from press associations, how many members would be lost to the collapse of revenue and the shutdowns. But boy, did we do some of our best work. I've seen some of the contests that are associations, and they're just admirable how they responded. And you had weeklies becoming dailies online because they weren't waiting to provide vital information. So we've got to look at our relevance. It needs a freshening up. It needs a revamping. This battle between changing consumer behaviors is something that's ongoing. And you know, the question is, are we adapting and are we transforming to the degree we need to? There's hope, and hope is not a strategy. So that's what the community forum comes in. And again, another boost is our history. That a lot of people, shoot holes in it. And, you know, we're a legacy. That I think that's great. We're traditional. I think that's great, because our history is a good part of our story as we figure out the future. But we've reflected our communities, and we've provided useful information, and we've often entertained and enlightened, and we're reliable, and we can bring people together with a product. And, you know, our work can solve problems by calling attention to them. So this is a good measure too. So there's a lot to build on. There's a lot to build on and being the community forum. So in essence, going back to the engagement, the importance of engaging a broader community, which is important because media is audience, and you know, that's how you monetize it to pay the bills and to gain the money for future investments. Just want to go on record with the community forum that we want to keep these types of customers, custom readers, these types of people in the community. We want those who care about good government, and those who are interested in crime and in fighting crime and justice, and those who want to check on obituaries of people who've lived just outstanding lives. And we want to keep people who love the arts and the humanities, and we want to keep people who enjoy a good feature about someone in their town that they didn't know but wish they did know, only because you've written that story. And we want to keep people who follow local, particular high school sports, and are interested in local schools and education. Boy, that's a whole knot of issues that are just ricocheting through the country, but they rely on you to report on that. We want to keep people who are interested in social justice, you know, particularly what's happened in the last couple of years. And we want to definitely keep people who care about their community like you all do. And we want to keep people who read. want to keep them coming back. But we also want to attract these types of people. We want to figure out how to keep people who don't care about government. There's unfortunately a sizable number of that, but we want to figure out a way to keep them reading our material and talking to us. We want people who have tuned out divisive politics, can't handle it anymore. We want to keep people who don't like to read but want to be informed. And a lot of you are experimenting with video and other ways of getting them. We also want to read, some of the biggest challenges of those who've never subscribed or who have never read a newspaper. We want to attract people who only get their information social media. We want to actually improve their mental health if that's the case. We definitely want to reach communities that are overlooked. That's really, really important. We also want to get young people to stay with us, and we want people who never know anybody whose name or picture has appeared in the newspaper. And the other key part we want to get is activists, and some activists might drive people crazy, but the activists are ground level and they're good entry points into issues. Let's see here. This is a pivotal time. Some might say it's a crisis, but if I know anything about our profession, the profession I love, the industry I love, it's that we do our best work during crises. So that's the backdrop. So let's be the community forum. Now let's get into what is the prospects for the community forum. In many aspects, the big idea is that everybody contributes, particularly with the state press associations involved, that it becomes a national conversation amplified by local events, that the community forum is practiced among local newspapers. It moves up to regional, and then to state, and then to more states, and then nationwide. So it's really a national conversation, but there's so many community forums out there, they all bubble up to a big impact. The strategy is threefold. One, reassert relevance. Remind people about the importance and the value of local journalism and what it brings to our society and democracy. And don't assume people know. Reestablish connections with all, not just traditional newspaper readers. And refresh our credibility, use our reputation, our expertise, and our established information gathering framework to expand our relevance to new audiences. So this is the goal of the Relevance Project's community forum. Reassert the relevance, reestablish the connections, refresh our credibility. If you had a little wider lens on this, it's actually to help communities reinvigorate themselves along with their newspaper. It's actually important in being a better informed democracy. And you do this by launching the community forum strategy. And you also unleash the press associations to collaborate with them and help. So there's an individual role, and there's a wider lens. If I were to break this down in 3 dance steps and what you focus the community forum strategy on, and you might shuffle this depending on your community, but I would start first by testing the strategy or using the format to explain the mission of the news organization. And that's important. Just you should be able to tell your story in town hall formats or at a concerted project using the community forum strategy. And that's how you learn how to use the strategy. And the topic is you, because you know it so well. In the process, you're raising the value and the brand value of your organization. So right off the bat, apply it to you in telling your story differently using the community forum strategy. The second thing is you could also go after deepening the news literacy of the community. This is a huge issue right now with disinformation involving the vaccines and all sorts of other, divisive politics. But you could jump to this right now, because if you think that the news literacy of your community, they don't understand the news ecosystem, they don't understand news, they don't understand your newspaper, you could gravitate towards them. There's the News Literacy Project. You could partner with them. Or you could take this whole strategy and become the advocate for improved news literacy in the community. If the news literacy improves and you are at the point of that spear, it's a good chance that they're going to stay with you as you move through this. And then the third part is use the format to examine community problems and explore related solutions using the town hall format, using the community forum formats. So when you think about the community forum, you say, where do I start? A good place is with your news organization and explaining what you do, and never assume that they understand that. It's amazing how much they know and not know about the newspaper or the local news, and how much you probably could learn from them on what you could do differently. This whole notion of taking on, not leaving it to, you could partner with other organizations in town to improve the news literacy of a community, and how they use information, how they determine what is a trusted news source, how they go about processing information so they don't get burned by bad information, that they have a list of go-tos, and you're one of them when they were trying to figure out what's going on in the community. And then 3 is the one that I did a lot in Richmond, is took some major issues where nobody was on the same page, or they needed a haven to go to have really serious conversations so they could move to the solution stage, but to examine your community. And what you get out of all these, you do get content. You get content and how about the conversation and what people say. You can get transcripts. So it's not like you're not going to get anything out of this. But there's content and there's plenty of material that you can use. So those are the 3 parts. And I added this from the last program I did because, well, somebody wanted to know where do I begin? You can begin with 3 and go right into community problems. You can begin on 1. You can begin. If you're a little unsure, start with yourself, because you know that story well. The community forum. So let's just talk about planning. This goes back into the big idea where solution-seeking communities throughout North America just talk about the uncertain future of local news and the related dangers. This gets it. If you're trying to figure out what the topic is, this might be where to go. Again, and maybe you can work with other newspapers in your area too. You don't have to go by yourself. The goal of the community forum is to raise awareness. It's also to inform. It's also to listen. It's also to learn, and also to enlist supporters to help communities and their newspapers adapt. And this is another way of trying to understand this, why you would do this strategy. There's great benefits to raising awareness about you, the news organization. There's great benefits about raising awareness about the importance of news literacy and being able to understand what is trusted news and what is disinformation. Great benefits to have the newspaper as the model listener, so that they know that there's an ear that they can count on to understand what their observations are, what their suggestions are, and what their points of reference are. There's ability to learn even more than just putting out a product. And also, by using a different strategy to engage communities, there's a better chance of enlisting supporters that go beyond, do you want to donate, a note on your website about please donate. You're out there, you're in person with them, and you're engaged, and it's more of a natural act. The whole process it does improve the literacy and uplifts community journalism. I feel strongly about that. I'll get into that in a few minutes. One bonus right now, you're early on in this process. It's July. There's nothing that prevents the 3 press associations or individual associations working with their members to use National Newspaper Week, where everybody does a conversation about newspapers during that week. I believe it's in October. Yeah, it's in October. And there's also a news literacy week for coordinated. So if you're looking to find a place on the calendar, National Newspaper Week in October, and you have enough time to plan for it, seems like an ideal location for this type of a conversation. And if you go within your state press associations, you can, put together your programs and then administer them differently, or they can be orchestrated by the state press association. So I hang that out there as a bonus, only because it's July and got a couple months to plan. What you don't want to do is, wake up one day and have a community program the next day. It's not going to work. It requires some planning. So the dance steps is to develop this whole notion of a community forum, to test it, to expand it, to fund it, because it might require some investment, and to amplify it through promoting it and also showing how it works. This is a borrow from innovation, the innovation process, but it's to kind of give you groundworks about where you are in the process. First, you develop your concept, you test it, you expand it, you fund it, and amplify it. So let me go back to the part one where I suggest if you're going to use a community forum strategy to engage your community, well, what would you engage your community on? So I suggested, well, you engage the community on who you are and what your value is to the community, and where you've been, what you're doing, and what you're going. And here are a number of topics you could use. You could devote all of October or the week of National Newspaper Week or all of a week or a month to explore these various topics. So I put some of them, when you have a topic, if you put it in the format of a question, then your follow-ups, particularly the centerpiece, the town hall, tries to answer these along with your audience. So here are some potential topics you could use as you ventured out using the community forum strategy, and the focus is on yourself or on local news. And you could do a whole approach on what your mission is and where you can improve. You can go broader from no matter where you are in this tri-state area. What is the future of local newspapers? You might be surprised what people thought. They might think everything is hunky-dory because you come out each week or twice a week. You might have a whole program on how can we better serve our readers. Just put it out there. You might use the pandemic and, has the pandemic changed us for the better? They probably saw you do different things and taken a temperature of what they're thinking. Here's one: how do we build trust with our news coverage? This is important, particularly where there's some strife and some conflict. Borrow the word relevant from the Relevance Project, and how can we be more relevant to you? It's a great word. Or just do a program on how we cover the news and, help strengthen our fill in the blank, help strengthen our coverage, or help strengthen our sources. So these are some topics, put in a question format that can move you to what the community forum is all about. If you wanted to move on, just, here are some additional topics that might be a little bit for part two, that deals with the news literacy focus. Again, your efforts in engaging are to improve the literacy so that they're better news consumers. A better news consumer is likely to stay closer to a newspaper. Here are the topics. How can we improve our community's news literacy? Just ask the basic question, and say you're asking because you want to build a better democracy or a more vibrant democracy. You say tomato, I say tomato. You say media, we say no. What are local news? Who is right? I actually did this program in Richmond. I'll mention it later on. Here's a great one: the disinformation era, the myths and facts about local news coverage. Just go right into it, put it out there, explore it, engage them, ask them, and then report back on what they're saying and what your reaction to it is. How do we stand up for the truth? Is there more we can do? And then an open mic. It's the whole, you can actually have town halls or programs. You just want to hear their stories. You don't have to have a news meeting to decide what the story is. You can just open the mic up and say, tell us your story. We're here to listen. That's a great behavior to have, being known as the ear of the community. Back on three, what topics would you decide to help problem solve in the community? You work with your community to decide. So those are just some suggestions going to that 3-part series: the community forum about you, the new local news, the community forum about news literacy, community forums approach about solving community problems. The thing I have to keep coming back to is don't let others control our story. And that's the reason for the Relevance Project. But if anything, this is another attempt to do that, to stop this, those who tell our stories. Nobody should tell our stories but us, in concert with the community, be the community forum. So your role is develop, test, do, build up. And there are other ways to toot our horns in addition to the town hall format. You can do regular columns discussing local newspapers' roles. I know some of you have done that. Some of you have regulars. That's fine. Some of you don't. Series on the First Amendment from a local perspective. Encourage other public forums on local journalism. The publication of civic lessons. There are some initiatives. Wisconsin has a First Amendment initiative that goes after civics, which have been lost in schools. That's a great niche or topic for newspapers to move in. Take news literacy training into the schools. You work with them and the news literacy project. And then, find ways to let readers know when coverage has made a difference. So I offer some other suggestions you can do along the ways. I don't have all of them listed in a nice bundle, but I'm trying to encourage you to think once you get rolling on the community forum is, how does your needs and interests adapt that community forum so you can be more effective in putting the newspaper in the center part of the community as the source and the hub for dialogue and conversations and information and sharing and solutions. Be the community forum. So let me give you 3 examples that I've gathered, and they're on different levels. The community forum strategy could be done on a statewide level with a state press association being the host with the members working in concert. Here's one in South Dakota where the South Dakota News Watch puts issues of statewide importance and writes about it and talks about it and has videos and has webinars and has town halls. Because you belong to 3 of the better state press associations, this workshop we're here today could ignite, well, what can we do on a statewide level on behalf of newspapers? What can we do on a statewide level on behalf of news literacy? What can we do on a behalf of statewide level to help solve problems that are statewide? And so in South Dakota, they came up with an organization that basically is the community forum. And if you study it, you can start to see what business models are there. I mean, sponsorships could help provide revenue. And of course, if you're online, you can always use different types of advertising. So this is an example of statewide, somewhat breaking news oriented. Here's a regional approach. This publisher in Western New York was on my New York Press Association discussion about the community forum in April. And he is using the format of engaging and encouraging and inviting people on conversations to basically create a new identity in the western part of New York. And recently, he had a town hall online, not ready for in-person town halls because of the vaccines, but he got an initial audience of 100, and they started to talk about what does the western region of New York, the background is they're upset with how they're treated in Albany. But imagine this, is that a newspaper publisher of a weekly working is now
Hello.
the point person on a discussion about a regional issue and what they can do. I thought that was pretty neat. So one way, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little feedback. One way if you don't want to go it alone, what Chris Caruso did is he had the idea and he invited other newspapers in Western New York, and lo and behold, he got about a dozen, and they all went in together on the series of conversations about what does a Western New York look like. So that's a possibility. Collaboration is also a way not to feel lonely. That's the way I put it. And then, okay, let me just get into this, my bias. And then this is the local newspaper doing it. So I thought maybe I would start with this, but I decided to put it at the end because it personifies the community forum. I called it the public square, and in Richmond, Virginia, that's what I did. And this is why I feel so strongly about this way of engaging. So I'll deal with what the public square is. But when I became publisher, and when you're new to a job, you go around, well, what do you think about the Richmond Times-Dispatch? And what I was getting back is that the paper was too aloof. It wasn't part of the community. It lectured people. It was bunch of a bunch of people who thought they knew everything, and it's really hard to get them on the phone, and no one covered this and no one covered that, and just, wow, I just didn't realize that was the reputation of the paper. And then I went to somebody and I said, well, I'm going to start inviting readers in, and we're going to have a conversation about what they think about the Richmond Times-Dispatch. And I was told nobody could come in the building, and that was really weird because we had this big room that could fit about 180 people. And that motivated even more that we were aloof, we weren't part of the community, and they didn't trust us. And so that led me on this initiative called the Public Square. So in short, the Public Square was all about fostering civic conversations on issues of importance. And if you pause on some of these words, they are also at the guts of what the community forum is all about. I would say that most communities, their conversations are not civil, but there's still a need there. So we were going to prove in Richmond, Virginia, that the newspaper was the initiator of civic conversations where people could talk about issues, some of them being tough, but he did so with respect and listening to the other side and giving people voice so that their ideas could be heard. We noticed in public hearings, there was a shot clock and people are angry. And there was also during the creation of the Affordable Health Care Act, if you remember some of those town halls back there where elected officials felt threatened, and some of them were, and they're just a mess. And so something had to be done in our community to foster this. So one of the key flanks of the community forum is that you can prove that your community can be one of those great places that they can have civic conversations and issues of importance, thanks to the newspaper being that moderator and being that initiator and being that ambassador. So in Richmond, I did 78 public squares over a 15-year period. When we started them, we never had any idea as to how they would go. But when we got on a roll, I went into the office one day and I said, I want to do these weeklies. And boy, the staff was not happy with me because it requires some effort. But we did 78. Sort of glad that it ended on an odd number. I wanted to get to 100, but we learned that there was a timing issue, that you couldn't have community conversations during the summer or during Christmas when people were distracted. But when we had them, it was the right timing. So it just happened to be 78. They were 90 minutes long. They felt that was a good time where you could get into some issues, and although some of them could have gone all day, that was also a compliment. Mostly in our 185-seat auditorium, and we picked all sorts of topics, from the controversial like gun control and race relations, and controversies at the State House, to the offbeat. Richmond, Virginia was the place where Lincoln was filmed by Steven Spielberg, and so we actually did one on what didn't you know about Lincoln when it was filmed in Richmond. That was a huge success. So in going through this experience, and the reason why I'm such a firm believer in the community forum strategy is it really made us a better newspaper. I mean, I was at a community meeting yesterday, and people want to know why there isn't any more public squares. Sorry, you have to talk to the news staff, but they still remember, and they still made a difference. I think it made us a better newspaper. The fact that we demonstrated listening and concern and compassion, and how we welcomed the community into our building, and we moved it around a three times, but mostly it was in our downtown building. It demonstrated the importance of listening. If all of you step back and you just think about how you listen these days. It's usually it probably is in the defensive stance when people call to complain, or it's when you're pursuing news stories. But is there ever a time where you just listen to a civic conversation of an issue of importance that you fostered? And if the answer is no, then try the community forum. It's also an excellent way of showcasing our journalism. Did this late, did this after the first 25, where um, the invitations would go out. The newsroom would then write about that issue the Sunday before the public square. We always made sure that we had the reporters in the room, and some of them participated in the moderation. And in some cases, they did the interviewing of the panel. It was really neat to be able to showcase the reporters, the subject matter experts of topics. But it was also to remind them that our content is very important to them and to us, but here are the people behind the byline. So it's an excellent way of showcasing local journalism. One major conclusion: people want to heard. They're frustrated. They want to be heard. And by using the format of the town hall, and through successful moderation, um, people can be heard in a respectful way. And I will tell you, the first 25 of the 78 public squares were sort of they weren't that good. I was always, but after a while, by doing it over and over again, it's like writing. You find your purpose. The reality of it is there are a few places where people can feel safe expressing their views. That's sad. If anything, this is another reason to advocate the community forum. Uh, um, the newspaper should be that place where people get heard, and the support that goes because of that is huge. The divisiveness, it's not going to get any better. I'm sorry, if I'm not going to leave this to government or politics to solve this. It's it's the local news operation that's going to help solve this, I believe, if they're willing to invest. So we can prove. I would end all the public squares by saying how proud I was of the community, that Richmond was a place where we could have a civil civic conversation, and people would smile. They go, yeah, I'm glad to have been here. Thank you for inviting me. And then I didn't move from conversations to solutions, but in studying the community forum strategy, that's why I'm advocating it with the community, because there's a hunger for it. And even if you just built all the potential solutions and let the community decide what was the best solution, at least you've teed up the possibilities, which is huge. So these are the conclusions based on my 78, and that's why I feel so strongly about this approach as part of the transformation of the business model. Digital gets all the attention, but digital is a technology, it's a thing. This is an activity. This is a pattern of behaviors. This is a purpose. This is a value. So a little bit on the format. You might want, well, how did you put these on? So here's the dance steps. Pick a topic. You invite the people. You inform on the topic in your newspaper and website. You conduct the public square. You report what's happened. You report report about the conversation, and then you create a whole transcript of the entire thing. You can edit it down if you don't have space, and then you run a picture with each speaker, going back to one of the standards of journalism: faces and names. So this is if you wanted to talk about how you put on a public square or a community forum, pick the topic, invite the people, inform them before the topic, so they're briefed, conduct the conversation, report out on what was said, and then the transcript for them to read. A lot of people sometimes don't like to go and sit in a room like that, but boy, I had a lot of people tell me that they went to the public square by reading the transcript. Put your topic in a question. That's another piece of advice. Organize the seats around a square. Don't put them in auditoriums so that the moderator can go into the audience real easily. There are various formats to hold a town forum. There's debates, there's panel conversations. I mean, just look at how state press associations conduct their workshops. There's presentations of research that debuts at the event. There's also open mic. How do you use those 90 minutes? There's the 30-30-30, where It's 30 for opening comments. The moderator then takes the second 30 minutes to ask questions of the panel or the debaters, and then 30 minutes for the audience, or then split it in half, 45 minutes on the program, 45 minutes on the audience asking questions. One time I almost lost my head in a public square is when I only left about 10 minutes for the audience, and boy, they were hot on that, and they paid me the ultimate reminder. This is our time for comments, so give us more time. So the 40-45 is a pretty good split between what you present with subject matter experts or panelists, but leave enough time for the audience to chime in. Make sure people can hear. This is the I did a public square where people, the left side of the audience left, and I found out that we forgot to turn the speakers on. So make sure people can hear. Involve your journalists. Demonstrate the interview, the talent of interviewing. We did some live interviews of newsmakers, and people got to see how reporters prepare and how they go about engaging their subjects. And don't be afraid to promote. Each time you promote or call attention to it, a handful of people get interested. You can't just leave it to one invite. So here's some suggestions on how to put the town hall or the public square together. And I'll make a relevance project offer. I've worked with Chris Caruso in Western New York. If you want any of my time as you contemplate a community forum approach or a town hall approach, keep in mind, I'd love to go on the road and put these on. I'll be happy to help. That's part of the initiative from NAM, and it's also part of the initiative from the state press associations, and particularly for this group, the tri-state, to divided me twice. I'll get on the phone, I'll get on a Zoom call. I'll be happy to give you everything I got of suggestions and help you launch these. So that's a special offer for those who are on the call today. The most important thing is to think, believe, and be the community forum. That's actually a slide that I wasn't going to show, but we'll leave it there. So I'll stop there in case anybody has any questions or wants to engage further on this. But that in essence is the presentation on community forum.
I think that Matt McMillan had a few questions that he asked during the during when you were talking. So Matt, I don't know, since you have a few questions, did you want to maybe unmute and ask those yourself? I think he's getting me.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can see your questions, so yeah.
Okay.
Shoot.
What do you think about, did you charge for the forums, and what did you think about providing something as an incentive for subscribers to get in free?
Yeah, I mean, once you get into this whole notion of being the community forum, there's all sorts of approaches you can do. So, at the outset, your initial audience is your newspaper audience. And you could flip this around and say, because you're the newspaper audience, you get in for free. And you could make it part of the reason why they subscribe. And at the same token, it can be an introduction to those who don't read you. So we did not charge. We viewed it as value added to those who are interested in their community, and a different way to engage us, and a different way for us to hear us. When I first started this, the newsroom was very skeptical. They thought the publisher was creating news, and they were very uncomfortable with it. But as they began to sit in the audience and see what the community was saying, they said, hey, we haven't heard that, or we haven't seen that. Who is that person? And they became a vital part of it. So you could create a membership component, Matt, and charge for it, and start with a small group, or you could get sponsors for it. We just didn't do it because of other reasons. But thinking of it as a reward, there's enough leeway for you to create your own approach towards that using the format I suggested. So if it works for you and your market, go for it.
Any suggestions on time of day?
Yeah, that's a good one. The best, most of our public squares were from 7 to 8:30. And the reason why is, you get people after work and after dinner. The next best was noon. Because we found that on certain issues, people went for, left lunch, and we thought about serving lunch with a sponsor, but and then we did one late in the afternoon, and it wasn't very good. So I would say 6:30, 7 start, do the 90 minutes, try to get them out before 9 o'clock. There were a couple of public squares where I couldn't get them out. They were still talking afterwards, 10 o'clock at night. But that's what we did. And then again, it also depends, once you get into the winter, 7 to 8:30 and it's snowing out, it's not really a good time. But that worked for us.
Okay. And you covered what was said in what was talked about in these forums in the paper?
Absolutely. As a matter, the newsroom didn't do it initially, and I said to him, I said, if something happens on the first floor and you're not there, it's on you. But this is actually great content. If you can get a newsmaker or a panel of newsmakers and have the audience engage them, and then write about that, because we made news. Here's an odd one. I'll give you. We have four principal communities in Richmond, and there was one new police chief. So it was right around the Ferguson problem in Missouri. Remember Ferguson?
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to invite the 4 police chiefs, particularly the new one, in for a conversation with the audience. And I said to him, you may not want to do this, but I'm a moderator and I will insist on respectful and civil conversation. I learned that was the first time the 4 police chiefs had appeared in public together. And so I was told that to the audience. And so the audience started to ask questions and engage them. And the story became part of their reaction to Ferguson, but also how they were trying not to be another Ferguson. It was on page 1. It was a huge story. Then the transcript, where we had everybody's comments with their picture, that filled 6 pages. So, if you're thinking content, there's nothing better than comments where your readers show up in your newspaper. Some of them had never been in a newspaper before, getting back to that panel about what type of people you want to get. So yes, we wrote about the story. We wrote a story, preview story about the event, transcript. Great content.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. Thank you. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, very well. Looks like somebody else is jumping in.
Yep. Let's see. Anybody else with a question or a comment? Thank you, Chris.
This is Chris in Minnesota. Thanks, Tom. I've got kind of a 2-part question, if I could. So I feel like my staff's strong suit is creating articles and taking photos and producing media, not necessarily running events, organizing events, or moderating discussions. And I wanted to ask, is there a certain magic that happens at these forums versus, a kind of written forum? Or, and B, how did you get better at running events or, moderating discussions?
Yeah, great questions. And I would say, what you don't want to do is use this strategy to chip away or weaken a strength. So if that's your strength, then I would view this as an accelerator. And since you know the issues in your community so well, this is a timeout to gut check what people are thinking about these issues one more time. So you might want to go on let's say you might want to do 2 a year or 4 a year or an annual one. If you do an annual one, you might tie it into an annual review of the community. You might, And so this provides the community input on something you were already doing. I think what I got out of this was I was really bothered by how poor people thought, how put off they were in trying to approach us. So it was the main attempt was to open our doors, and anything, just listen. It's so bizarre to say that people don't feel like they're being listened to, and there are some breaking points in this country over that. The neat thing about us is we know the issues and we've talked to people, but what this does, I would say this would add a component that you don't have, and that is mass. So you talk to your newsmakers and I mean, you might have man on the street. This just provides another vehicle to make sure you're in tune with what your community is thinking. This is also, if you do these on a regular basis, you'll never have to hire somebody to do a research project. You will know by then. And also, there are a lot of people, I mean, I solved a lot of circulation problems by talking to people afterwards because they claim the paper. I mean, it's like, you don't know where it's going to go. So I would look at doing these as well as you do your content, but I would add a component of them. I would, like, for instance, let's just like spitball here. So let's just say you do 4 a year. Okay, that may sound like madness to you, but one is about you. This is what we're doing. Your first one is at the beginning part of the year. Here's what we're going to do in 2022. Your second one is on disinformation, about where do people get their news and information, and what ones do they trust? You want to know that in addition to you, and what can we do about this disinformation? Your third and fourth one is the two top issues in your community, and what is the problem? Why do people feel bothered by it? And what are the potential solutions? Bing, bing, bing. You take the last 3 or 4, and you have a special issue that's attached to what you normally would do, and bam, you bring in the community voice, and it's huge. That work?
Yeah, I can really see the benefit of that. This kind of format would bring in people who might not read the newspaper all the time. So I totally see the benefit there. Can you talk a little bit? How did you turn your journalists into forum moderators, or get better at running events?
Well, you pick those who are very comfortable, and some of our reporters are painful introverts, and they just this would not work for them. But I'll give you a great example. We had a reporter who had been bird dogging folks who were unjustly put in prison. We had a guy who was in prison for 33 years because the prosecution screwed up the case and the evidence. And our reporter wrote about it, and guess what? The evidence was crooked, and he was freed. And because of a reporter, he had his first public meeting with us at the public square, and the reporter interviewed him. And I will tell you, the reporter asked a lot of the questions over time, but what the public got to see is it's a real talent prying information out of people. And they saw the reporter with his pad of questions, and they saw the reporter like change midstream when it went to an answer that he didn't expect. So they use the reporters to interview a newsmaker. Actually, use the reporter to talk about the story he or she covered, and how they went about covering it, and why it's a significant story. Use the reporter to sit on a panel while you're the moderator to also ask questions with you. And then use the reporter to just explain how they got the story. And actually, my favorite is we actually had an editor who was in the movie Lincoln, and told this great story. He was in the death scene by accident because he had a beard, but he had the wrong pants on, so they had to cut the scene different. I mean, you just never know. So how they do their craft, how they got the story, and then help you as the moderator ask the questions, because if it's all on you, you're also trying to keep the room sane, but just go be a partnership on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, Natasha.
Hi, thank you for this. I'm just wondering if in any of those 78 that you did, that you targeted demographics, like for instance, you wanted especially to reach high schoolers and have them show up, or a minority population.
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes. I'll give you a couple. This is early on. Remember, 2005 to 2019 is the period. We actually did one on what is this MySpace? What is this thing called social media? Actually, we're ahead of the time because half the audience didn't know what we were talking about. So underage, you can do this two ways. You can pick the topic, underage drinking. And in Richmond, used to drive me crazy when out-of-towners would call it the capital of the Confederacy, and all the statues have come down here. But we did a couple on racial strife, and the paper's history itself would, why are you doing it? We earned a lot of credit. So yes. And then we learned after Public Squares 25, the power of invitations. And so the really good conversations work this way. There were probably 50 people who you wanted to talk about it because they were so knowledgeable, but you only had room for 3 people on the panel. But you invited the other 47 and say, boy, we would really like you to come and talk. So when they stood up, even though they weren't on the panel, they were smart, if not smarter, in making key points, and you knew who they were. So you pick a topic, and if you're smart about who you want in the audience, very important for a newspaper to have a younger audience and to be around them. So you pick a topic, but you do have to do the invitation. We found inviting college classes was very good, like either journalism classes or, let's say you're talking about underage social working classes. We have Virginia Commonwealth University, 38,000 students here during the time. They made a great addition. They weren't print readers, but they became online readers, and it really helped to see their name on the website.
How big is your circulation? Like, how big of a newspaper are you? Or
when I became publisher, we were 210. When I left, we were 80.
Okay.
But online, we were growing quickly. So, that's the other audience.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Great question. Thank you for answering. Anybody else? So I will send the PowerPoint presentation to Julia if I can get it through this antiquated WordPress system. But if anybody wants to go offline, happy to talk. And I applaud you for your interest in it. Chris's question about, we're doing all this other great stuff. How does this fit into it? You've got to make that determination. I think if the business model moves to the community forum strategy, you have the community first in mind, and then the platform conversations follow. And there's a way to monetize a large audience, and that's what you're after. And it's another way to introduce yourself to audiences you don't have, but it's another way to match question to reward audiences you do have and making them feel special. I feel so strong in it. It worked. And to the other, my first 25 are not very good, but I'm glad I made the mistakes, and the audience gave me a wide berth because they saw I was trying to listen to them, and that was the best thing. So be the community forum.